Hello, everyone. Hi. Hopefully everybody has joined our seminar. And first of all, I'd like to say welcome. And our topic today is a digital approach to assessment with the CFR. And my name is Toshi, and I will be the moderator this afternoon, morning, evening. And we're very glad to have all the participants joining us today. And hopefully you've all seen the video by Thom and Sean, and you've probably heeded Thom's suggestion to definitely join us. Now, well, without further ado, I would like to welcome Professor Gao and Dr. Adrian Raper to give us an opening remark. So now I will mute my microphone and give the floor to Professor Gao.
Can you hear me? Yes? Okay,
yes.
Sorry. It's a distinct honor to have this opportunity to share with all of you our experience of using DPT. I was very privileged to have the opportunity of attending an intensive training. I think it was, to me, it was like a training workshop organized by Clarity and the developer of DPT. In that event, you know, I learned there were dozens of participants from different Asian countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and other parts from other parts in Asia. And we have the opportunity to contribute our expertise to the reviewing of the items developed by DPT. And so it was in that event, we learned a lot from how DPT was developed. And so I think this was a rare opportunity for me to know the details of DPT. And later we used the DPT at NTU. So I would like to share with all of you about our experience of using DPT from different perspectives. So I'm very glad to have this opportunity to have the academic exchange with all of you. Okay, and I will okay. So okay, I now can Adrian talk about DPT. Okay, so okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Gao, and to everyone at NTU for hosting this webinar, and to our moderator today, Toshi, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. The webinar has been organized by my colleagues Pui Yi in Hong Kong, Kima in Taiwan, Katharina in Australia, and Avida in Indonesia, who've made everything come together so smoothly. Thank you to them. And it's also a joy and a privilege to have Sean McDonald from telc and Thom from, well, Europe, really, talking about CEFR. They really are the experts, and this is their specialist subject. So I know that's going to be an interesting session. Let me give a very brief introduction to Clarity English. For the last 30 years almost, we started in 1992, we've been publishing digital materials to help teachers teach and students learn English online. For almost all of that time, we've worked extensively with schools, universities, and libraries in Taiwan, Australia, and Indonesia. Whilst we've been lucky enough to come and visit in the past, at least now we still get to meet you in webinars. So much of the way that our programs have developed over the years is due to the feedback that we get from you. Our programs are never going to be perfect, but the suggestions that you make and the requirements that you have do help us get better. So today's session is on digital approach to assessment with CEFR, is part of our commitment to supporting the effective teaching and testing of English online for Taiwanese, Australian, and Indonesian teachers and students, wherever it's wanted. Now, I'm looking forward to my talk later, but for now, let me hand you back to Toshi.
Thank you, Adrian. Now, let me begin our seminar. So we will start with the first topic of the day. And let me share the screen again with you. Okay, so our first topic today is a digital approach to assessment with the CFR. And the topic will be presented by Sean McDonald and Thom Jones, who you've probably seen in the YouTube video. Now, Sean McDonald is the project manager of English assessment at TELC, or the European Language Certificates Test. And Thom Jones is the director of Brock Solutions Agency. Now, let me begin a brief introduction on Sean McDonald. Sean McDonald comes from California and has degrees from the University of California and University of Washington. He has taught and trained in various contexts, business, adult and higher education, and his experience he has more than 30 years of experience in this area. He's taught at the University of Washington, the German Armed Force University, and the German Air Force Academy. And currently, he is head of English language assessments at TELC language tests in Frankfurt, Germany. And Thom Jones is director at Brock Solutions Agency, and he has worked in international education for nearly 30 years. He has been a principal of schools in Indonesia, USA, and Greece, and he also runs international summer programs in Oxford and Cambridge colleges. Currently, he is a guest lecturer at 3 universities around the world, and he is also the director of business development at Atlantic Language School, Galway, Ireland. And he is a freelance trainer in business and management and has been invited to speak at global conferences year-round through his own company, Brock Solutions Agency. Most recently, he has presented at NAFSA, or the National Association for Foreign Students Affairs, also in MAX-TESO, which is the Mexican Association of Teachers of English, at NIAS, the National English Language Teaching Accreditation Scheme, and also closer to home at IELTS, which is the International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language. Now, for the first topic, a digital approach to assessment with the CFR, here is the brief abstract. So basically, any assessment starts from the point where you're measuring test takers, and the can-do statements in the CFR provides examiners with a globally recognized tool for determining a test taker's ability. The scale also allows detailed information about their micro skills. And so this webinar and this presentation will look at aligning the CFR with a digital test to instantly assess a test taker across a wide spectrum of skills. Now, without delaying our webinar, I would like to give the floor to Sean and Thom. And so thank you.
Good morning, welcome. Thanks very much for that introduction, Toshi. I'm not certain that I can actually back up any of those great things that you've said about me, but
I know the summation was more than enough. I think we're done.
I'm pretty impressed. I'm particularly pleased because my mother is watching. So, Mum.
Hi, Mom.
Nice. It's an important part. So, Selamat pagi and Guacha, proving, gentlemen, ladies, and everyone, that I can't speak Indonesian and I can't speak Taiwanese. And I think that makes me somewhat stupid, so I can apologize for that slight thing. I would like to say this morning, ladies and gents, this afternoon for you, this evening for some of you, whenever, wherever you're watching this, welcome and thank you for your time coming along today and talking to us.
Good to have so many people here. We're getting quite a group, huh, Thom? It's great.
It's very exciting, I think, to see people from all over the world. I think that's always a joy. And the reason that we're talking to you today about the CEFR, which is a European standard, is not because it's better. than other standards, not because it will suit all needs. We're talking about the CEFR purely because it's a standard that we use for specific purposes. So we want to talk to you about those purposes and give you some idea of how it might be useful in your context. So as I proved with the introduction there, in terms of desperately trying to remember some of my Indonesian from 20 years ago or more when I ran a school in Sumatra, the experience of learning a language is very different for everyone, and people's ability in a language is very different and expressed very differently. So an assessment of language is always an assessment of partly that moment and partly those different skills and how they come together. So for example, Sean is American but lives in Germany, and as a result his German is very fluent. He works every day in German and he conducts his personal life in German. So when Sean speaks German, he sounds very German. His grammar is excellent. His fluency is wonderful. And we know that because of his qualifications. Now, I learned all of my German maybe 25 years ago, working in a bar in Opladen in the summers for 2 years running. And when I speak German, I sound quite good because I can do a good German accent. Unfortunately, I have no grammatical base in German whatsoever. So whenever I have a conversation with my German colleagues, there's always an initial kind of, people sort of go, oh gosh, clever, he can speak German. And then there's a confusion after about 2 minutes of conversation where they go, what? Because I make no sense. So linguistically, I think it's a really interesting one, isn't it? The measure of who can speak what and how they can speak it. I always think of Harry Potter. Obviously, I often think of Harry Potter because I look like
you speak German?
Characters. But it's, I think with Harry Potter, it's that thing about magic and language, and being able to speak a language is magic. The thing with Harry Potter is that nobody knows that you're a magician until you do magic, you know, and nobody knows that you can speak a language until you do speak the language. And the pieces of paper that we have that qualify us, that tell the world what we can do, are largely meaningless until we do it. So assessment in that sense is a really difficult thing to get right. And I'm sure we've all seen at university, the tertiary level problem for students wishing to use another language as a study tool is it's quite easy to achieve a mark in certain, you know, tests. And we've all seen, I think, students that have come to the UK or the US or Australia or other English speaking programs, and on paper, they've got a great score at IELTS or whatever it is that says that their English is great. And then when you talk to them, they can't order a coffee. And that kind of basic, that basic problem is really difficult for all of us. And I think partly what I wanted to look at today is what we mean when we ask, what can you do? And what we mean when we use the words of description. So this, ladies and gents, as I'm sure you can see, is a spoon. Now, confusingly, when my wife, for example, asks me to pass her a spoon, I don't know if she means this spoon, which is a very large steel spoon, or if she means this spoon, which is a smaller steel spoon. But she might also, let's be honest, she might also mean this spoon, which is an even smaller spoon. But she might, and this is actually possible and has occurred, she might mean this, which is a wooden spoon. But sometimes, let's be honest, she could also want to mean this. Now, luckily, I had the foresight and the wisdom to marry somebody from a different culture. And as a result, we don't have the same first language, which I would recommend as a path to joy and happiness in marriage, because we fundamentally don't really understand each other, and that's brilliant. And I also, to be honest, if I can just digress for a second, that really, really helps in terms of parents-in-law, because my parents can never communicate with my wife's parents without one of us translating for them. And I would wish that on anybody in a relationship. Now, these spoons, ladies and gents, are obviously a nice selection, and I'm quite proud, but they're all spoons. So when we talk about a spoon, we're talking about all of these spoons. And I think in terms of language learning, I'll put the spoons away now because they're just a bit confusing. In terms of language learning, when we say, how good is your French, German, Russian, what we're asking people is do you have a piece of paper that says you can do this? Can you actually do this? And do you have a rubric to assessment which can actually tell people what you can do? Because, for example, the German example that I used earlier, I can speak German. I can make myself understood in German. People will understand that I'm an idiot, but that's also true in English. The thing I think in German for me is that if I do a traditional assessment, I can achieve, I'd probably get like a B1 because my speaking is quite good. My understanding is quite good. I can read quite well. I can write virtually nothing. But I'd get a score that said that as a blanket, I have this level. Whereas, of course, in some elements, I have that level. But in others, really hardly anything at all. And that balance in assessment is really key, isn't it? So the CEFR is something that we wanted to look at because it talks about what we can do. That's a kind of key element, isn't it, Sean?
Yeah.
It's something
absolutely.
that, it's a real kind of useful marker for employers, for universities, for people who need to know what a language learner can do. And I think if we can just a little bit talk about this last year, because this last year in terms of assessment, but in terms of learning and education has been, it's been a very weird year for everyone. I think if 2020 had been a movie, I'd have wished to leave in about March, throwing my popcorn down in disgust. And it has felt, in terms of the kind of pandemic and all this stuff, it has felt like a very bad Hollywood movie. And it's something that, there's elements there that, I know, I'm kind of hoping that Bruce Willis will suddenly appear in a vest and we can only but I think what's interesting about the kind of, for us as educators and assessors, what's interesting in terms of the pandemic is how much we've seen everybody going online and how much work has gone online. So now saying, can we do assessment online? Asking this question 2 years ago is a very different question. For us, what's interesting about Clarity and the GPT is that it's not something that people have rapidly tried to get going in the last year and kind of gone, right, bang, this is kind of years and years in the making. And that shows. And I think what's interesting for us is that online education, which is a big thing now because of the pandemic, it's not a new thing. It's not a kind of last 12 months, here's a few ideas. Online learning and online testing is a huge thing, and it's been there for a long time, and you don't need me to tell you that. You all know this. And I think in terms of assessment, what's happening now is that thing about people, people are working on their phones, people are using their phones for their daily life, for their social life, for their professional lives. And why would we not assess people on their phone? Why would we not be able to measure their abilities in the same way that they measure their own kind of social life, their own professional lives? I'm having a look at these things. I've had a look at spoons. I've exposed the fact that I'm not very good at German. I'm also not very good at a variety of other languages as well, but I don't like to brag. The things we want to take you through now are complex and they're clever. And for that reason, I'm going to pass you over to my complex and clever.
Complex, but not complicated. Thank you very much, Tom. You really touched on a lot of things, and so I'll probably be repeating most of what you said, which is fine. But one thing you popped out many times are can-do statements. You said that many times, and I'd really like to put those in big words. Can do. We're looking at what you can do. With you, Tom, well, we can find something, I'm sure, that you can do. And
massive
also
objects.
Well, you can talk about spoons. I don't think that's a descriptor, but that's another point that you mentioned, were the descriptors from the CEFR, that we get to these descriptors that we can exactly pinpoint which bits of the language we're looking at, what's important, and what we're looking for. Another point that you said that I will repeat as I go along is that these are things that will describe what you can do in a language, and we can confirm, well, using our wonderful online tool here. I'd just like to say one thing about the language learning. When I first learned German, thank you, by the way, for the compliment on my German. It's not nearly half as good as the way you say it. But I remember when I first came to Germany the first time, coming all the way halfway around the world, and you know, some very nice Germans took care of me, and they took me out to a cafe. They said, well, we're going to go to a cafe and have something to drink. And I sat there while the waitress was coming and thinking, and it's okay, how am I going to do this? And then the waitress gets there. You probably know this, Thom, and she gets there, and I said, good morning, I would like a glass of Coca-Cola, if you please. And everybody looked at me and said, that's not how you order. And I said, well, how do you do it? You just say a Coke. And that was, right? The difference between, well, the German you learn in high school and the way that people speak it on the streets here. I'd like to share my presentation. Now, let's see if I can get the technology going. So tell me if I ball it up, Thom, but it looks to me like you should be able to see my presentation. Is that right?
Absolutely can. It's looking good.
All right, so there's another can-do check for me. Look at that, we're really cooking today. So here we are. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Gao, for your kind introductions. Thank you also for hosting us. Thank you to Clarity English. We're talking today about a digital approach to assessment with the CEFR. We'll get to it. And we're also looking at the Dynamic Placement Test. Who am I to talk about the Dynamic Placement Test? Well, me and Mr. Thom Jones are some of the energy. I mean, you're looking at a lot of the energy here on the screen for developing it. I'd like to tell you about myself real quick. Just real quick, my name is Sean McDonald. I come from telc language tests. And I was on the part of the development team with developing this test. I'll get into our credentials at telc just a little bit, but we put more or less of 60 years of know-how into this test. I bring a few years to that, as well as a developer with thinking, well, how can we take these things that are on paper and from the CEFR and put them into a test? Talking about language learning and about testing, well, we start off with nothing, right? We had to build all this. And Thom and I were thinking, going way back in time, into the dawn of human history, about humanity, because language is something that is human in us, that brings out our humanity. And we thought about, what does it mean to be human? What makes us human? Well, being human, of course, means we use fire. And not only fire in the campfire, but we have fire in our phones. That's what makes our phones work, our computers work. So much of our society is based on fire. We care for each other. We work together. Look at us here. This is a great example. All across the world, we're really stretched across the world, all working, caring for each other in one way or another. We speak complex languages. I'm curious, maybe at the end we'll have time to figure out exactly how many languages we speak together here in this group. Probably all of them. What do you think, Thom?
Guarantee I'm the only person that speaks Welsh.
You might be the only one. And of course, being human means that we love to measure things. We go around and the world that we perceive all around us, we measure. We've got centigrades, we've got kilometers, and we've got decibels, we've got Richter scales. We count calories, at least I do. We count our watts, we count our bits of energy flying around, we count the megabytes that we have left in the minutes that we use on our phone. And of course, we have global standards everywhere, in science and in nature, in finance, in education, in energy. Everywhere you look, actually, there's a scale, right? Of course, we even have a scale for our chilies. We can measure chilies, we can look at a chili, and we can see where this chili winds up on the scale. I believe that this scale is not quite complete. I believe it goes off with some really massive, hot, genetically engineered monster chilies that would probably put you in bed for a week. But even chilies have their own scale standards, and we can measure the chilies and measure chilies against each other. We have worldwide standards. Of course, in Taiwan, I understand that this is the standard for chilies in Taiwan. Is that right, Professor Gao? Yes, he's nodding. Good. And we have standard measurements worldwide, or almost worldwide. Here you can see that all of humanity, which I think personally is an amazing thing, all of humanity, billions of people across the world, we almost agree on measurement, right? We have the blue, which is the metric scale. We have some red bits here left in the world. Well, there's California over here, which have the imperial scale. And then we have one little tiny bit of green here. If you can see up in the North Atlantic, there's a little island in green. And this island, well, they have both scales. They say they use one, but they actually use the other one. And then they make fun of us in the red countries because we use the scale that they invented. So as a whole, humanity has done a pretty good job of standardizing their scale for measurement. And just like the chilies and for measurement, we have a scale for English. We actually have a lot of scales for English. There's quite a confusing array of the different scales that we have here for English. And if you look closely, maybe this group here, we're quite a large group today, maybe you'll recognize a scale that you use, from the TOEIC to the TOEFL to the Cambridge, and way at the end, IELTS and the CEFR, right? We also have a brand new scale in this, the Global Scale of English, and this is from Pearson Languages. Also a brand new scale, people, in my opinion, who may be reinventing the wheel, right? But a new scale for measuring English, why not? Very smart people at Pearson, I must say, right, Thom? We've met them before.
Lovely people, lovely people.
Lovely people, very clever, amazingly. Well, a score, a high score on one of these scales can open up the world for us, right? It can send us everywhere. This number that we can get on one of the scales I showed you will give us, offer us great opportunities in education, in travel, maybe for immigration, or even perhaps help us land that dream job. We do all kinds of TELC language tests. We do all kinds of testing for businesses, right? To climb the corporate ladder, you have to demonstrate a use of English. And so, well, a well-recognized score on an English test is a little bit like a passport for a lot of us, a sort of documentation that helps us cross borders. And I would say for me living in Germany, I'd be lost without my passport. I need it to get everywhere, right? But what does the passport say? Well, it tells you your name, your age, your citizenship, but not really anything more about myself, about my skills. My passport would never give me this wonderful introduction that Mr. Thom Jones just gave me, or tell the world, wow, Sean speaks really good German. A passport is just, well, here's a guy, he has a blue passport. That's about it. So many people can also consider this English test as a gatekeeper. And just like my passport, it allows me to go to certain countries, but it will not allow me access everywhere in the world. There are a few countries that don't like me, right? So even if I don't get that proper score, I will not access the places that I want to go. But what exactly is that? A CEFR or an IELTS scale? Well, IELTS is a number, but what does it mean? I'm looking here at the IELTS band score here, and what does it tell me about a language learning and my language learning journey? And I often wonder myself, what's the difference between a 4 or a 4.5, between a 7 or a 7.5. Here we see a comparison. We see here a relative scale, which I've looked at. This comes directly from the IELTS website. And I have to point out that these numbers here are very valuable numbers because they gain you access to many places around the world. But I'm wondering, what exactly do they tell you about your language skills? What does a 6.5 tell me, right? One thing I'd also like to point out is more and more language boards, this is just one example, but more and more language boards around the world are really scrambling to compare their scale to the CEFR. So we see again and again how this comparison works. But what does the language test really tell us about what our language skills are and where we're headed in our language learning journey? Well, if we look back, some people never even took a language test. One of the most successful emigres, one of the most successful people coming to the United States, well, he just came right in. Didn't need an English test, would not happen nowadays. His English was okay if you've heard him, but I don't think he ever made it to the C2 level. Tom, did he? I mean, he did. He wrote some his math was a level C2.
I mean, it's a complex one, isn't it? You know, his math was certainly a C2, and in terms of English language learning, maybe not, but still, genius.
Genius, exactly my point. So what about me? I'm looking for something that tells something. I'm sorry?
You're a genius too.
Oh, well, thank you, I appreciate it. What about me? What about my skills, my abilities, my strengths, my weaknesses, and my chances for success here? Well, what's in a number? I'm not saying that the IELTS, for example, or any of the others is a poor test. What we're really looking at is different types of tests. We're looking at formative tests, we're looking at summative tests, we're looking at diagnostic tests, right? A formative test, as you all know, is something used during the learning process to provide us feedback on the process and on where we are in our language learning or other learning journey, right? Summative tests are used at the end of a learning process. And I think there we have it really in a nutshell. Formative to tell us where we are, to help guide us into where we're going in the future. And the summative at the end of the day, that's the passport. That lets us through the border. Well, and that gets us.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think there's an element there. There's formative, summative, and diagnostic, and all of those can be part of the washback that we were looking at before. That exactly. You and I have talked about a lot. You know, what does a test do in terms of test takers? Does it reward test takers for what they know, or does it punish them for what they don't know?
Right.
And that's what
and we know the answer to that, right? I mean, we're talking here with our CEFR about can do, right? And not you will be punished. None shall pass. Well, the standard for the world for measuring progress for language learners is the CEFR. And what I really like about the CEFR, and what Thom just talked about beforehand, is that it's not only for English speakers, right? We can use this CEFR, as Thom mentioned, for Turkish, for German, for Finnish, for Estonian. We've translated at telc, our office, we've actually translated the CEFR into several different languages as well. We can apply the concepts for the CEFR for languages across the world. And what I really like about it is that we can compare languages, right? Thom could say, well, my Turkish is a B2, and I can say, well, my German is also a B2, and then we can go out and into the world and see how we do on it. Theoretically, we should be able to do the same thing, only in different countries, right? But what's wonderful about the CEFR, as Thom mentioned before, is we're talking about descriptors, very detailed descriptors, and they're going to tell us what we're able to do, what we can accomplish, and where we stand in our language learning German. Or to put it another way, we can answer the question, how good is my English? Or Thom instinctively, how good is my German? And he knows right away where to place the level of learning that he has for the German. So the CEFR is really a true measure of your progression in the language learning journey. Well, here, measuring English, and we can take kind of a global look at what we're talking about for the CEFR. Now, I'd like to point out the blue book I showed you is over 200 pages long, a very thick book. It's we call it our Bible. We can base everything on it, right? It's 260 pages long with very detailed can-do statements, ranging from level A1 to C1. Maybe some of you, Professor Gao, do you remember the way stage, the threshold, and the vantage levels? Yes, he's nodding. Yeah. Well, incorporating all of that, splitting that up from 3 levels into 6 levels across the band. And you can see, I love it. You can see all of these statements on this table start with I can, right? Our can-do statements. So even though we can use a score on one of the other scales to gain entry somewhere in the world, actually it's a requirement to get a score on one of the other scales to gain entry. The CEFR is clearly the global measuring tool for tracking a student in his learning journey, right? But as I said, this big blue book that I showed you, by the way, available for free download, this big blue book I showed you is, well, a big blue book. We can't drag it around everywhere with us, right? And we can't just pop it open every time we see a student and say, oh, here you are in your learning journey. So we've managed to pack our experience and the contents of this big blue book that I showed you earlier into a handheld digital test that all fits into the palm of your hand. An assessment tool, a diagnostic tool that gives you a quick, easy, and very accurate view of where you stand and a detailed view of where you stand in your language learning. So I'd like to take a look at what we've done so far. First of all, this is a very boring slide. It's no colors, lots of words, but I just like to point out a little bit of our methodology behind it. And if you take a look here at this scale, just to get an understanding, we can talk about, well, some of the tasks. So a reading, what the task is. We've described this, right, in our task. What the question looks like here, how we build it, right? This is taken from our specifications for the test. And as you can see, for every single question, we have CEFR statements. So all of these in capital letters are can-do statements. And so what we're doing is we're mapping or we're matching every question to a can-do statement. Sorry, I think I just shook my camera there. Good. And you see some instructions how that works, right? And so this is kind of the back end. That's kind of the less fun part, the less colorful part. I'm more of a hands-on person. As I said, all DPT items are mapped to the CEFR, and they kind of guide us through this measuring tool to tell language learners where they are in their journey and what it looks like. I would like to show you now, well, here you see some examples, you know, in your hand, as a tablet, as a laptop. All Apple devices, I just noticed, huh? Is big in Hong Kong. I would like to show you a very detailed descriptor here with vocabulary. I think it's big enough for everybody to read there, and we can see some of the descriptors. From the very bottom, a basic vocabulary of isolated words and phrases, all the way to a very good command of very broad lexical repertoire, including idiomatic expressions and colloquialisms, right? And so this is just one descriptor of the hundreds that are available to us in the CEFR. And this is what we look at to start our journey. I guess we could say that, well, Thom and I, we have been on a test building journey, haven't we? And this is one of the early steps in the test building journey. And well, lots of steps go on in between, but this is what it looks like. Again, I'm going to skip back to the thing, looking at our descriptors, sufficient vocabulary to conduct routine everyday transactions. And this is how it would look. For example, a phrase or something that Germans have a lot of problems with here, a bit. What do we do with that? And placing that into the proper spot, right? As you recall, our digital placement test goes from level A1 all the way to C2. So we have to have questions for the entire spectrum of the CEFR. And here you can see, well, I guess nobody can raise a hand here. I'll just give you that. You can see that we aim this. This is something that we expect from a level A2 test taker, right? To go back again. Sufficient vocabulary to conduct routine everyday transactions. Younger than me.
Definitely do that. I can definitely do that.
I
mean, I think one of the interesting things here, Sean, is that a lot of native speakers in their own languages are not at that advanced level of speaking. And it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we often do that thing where we talk about a native speaker as if that is in some way a qualification, which of course it isn't.
That's actually something that they took out of the CEFR, Thom. You're right to point that out. You probably recall in the early days of the CEFR, we talked about native speakers, and now we actually removed that for exactly that reason. That well, what is a C2 isn't actually a native speaker. My kids or me, I'm a native speaker, but I'm not always a C2, am I?
No, exactly. I think, it's very common if you're reading a book in your first language, you'll often encounter new words because that's how languages work. They're kind of infinite, kind of vast, they're constantly evolving. And if you read a book in a foreign language, if I'm reading in French, for example, and I find a word I don't know, I always go, oh no, I'm stupid, my French is rubbish. Whereas if I'm reading a book in English and I find a word I don't know, I think, oh great, interesting new word.
That's actually a really good point, for teaching that we try to get our students, again, going back to the scales, and that's how a perfect example of how we can use the scales, right? Is that we say, well, we don't expect you to know everything. You're learning French and you can look at somebody. We don't expect you to know every word on the menu. Of course, in a French menu, no one could ever learn all the words. We don't expect you to know all that, but we do expect you to understand the basic concepts. And I think that's exactly the point that you're making there, Thom. Another example from the DPT is listening to announcements and instructions, right? Here we have some scales. These are very specific, very detailed scales that we've looked at. And we're talking about announcements and instructions, can understand simple technical information, can catch the main point, looking at can understand instructions addressed carefully and slowly, right? Listening to announcements, and we thought, well, how could we make that? This is one of my favorite items. I'm really excited about this, and this is how it looks in the DPT, right? I love this item. What we're doing here, listen to the audio and drag the right image. So we have several items here, an airplane, a boat, right? Anybody can understand them, so you don't need to speak any language to understand these pictures. However, you're hearing by clicking on the button, I can't play it for you with the presentation, but we're listening to situations. For example, the one situation is all passengers aboard flight 93 to Newark, please go to gate 33 for boarding, right? And of course,
I'll do that. All passengers on gate 357, please travel for the flight to Newark. Yeah, that.
Exactly, but it would be more like this, Thom. Oh, Newark. Oh. Good.
But being able to understand that sort of stuff and that kind of communication is a real key skill.
Newark, I heard Newark. What do I do? What do I do? The second one being, I don't know, the train going to Zurich leaves from platform 23, track 42 at 4:30, right? And so going back to the descriptors we're looking here, A2, B1 level, right? Where we can say, okay, this is a situation describing an airport. This is a situation describing a train station. And what's really nice about that, with this kind of item, we get away from mixing our descriptors too. So this item is truly about listening, right? You have to read the instructions, I suppose, but you know to click the button and you listen to something. And what do we listen to? So really a purely listening item, which I think turned out really well. Another example I'd like to show you that we're doing, so we've looked at vocabulary, we've looked at listening items, overall reading comprehension. For example, we're kind of up a higher level at the overall reading level. And I'd like you to take a look at some of the higher levels. I'm going to look at C1, can understand in detail lengthy complex texts, right? And so this is what it would look like. Very lengthy, complex test. Puts me right to sleep. If I can't sleep at night, I just read this and I'm out. It's too complex for me, right? That's what the text looks like. That's how we represent it in our test, in our digital placement test. But again, to go back to reading, now I can go down lower and go to a very specific, very detailed CEFR descriptor. And again, I'd like to point to the C1 level, can understand in detail a wide range of lengthy, complex texts likely to be encountered in professional or academic life, right? This came out great, I have to say. Our partners in Clarity, they did a wonderful job of just making this look awesome. And here you know,
I say awesome because he's Californian.
Yeah, it's mega awesome. I mean, it just. But take a look at that. I mean, as a test developer, I'm interested in the words Mars, here we come, and how it works. But it just comes out on the screen so well. It's just a wonderful design. But that's not why I'm here. I think our colleagues will tell us more about that. But here, I'm going to go back again. My descriptor, reading for information. I'm looking at a C1 level, a wide range of lengthy, complex texts. And this is how it looks in our digital placement test, right? With clearly defined paragraphs, and we're asking questions, which part of the text does it say, blah, 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 a Mars mission, right? So very exciting and very accurate. And I have to say, very usable as well from someone coming from a paper test background, right? Well, my question is, how do we know it works? I think a lot of you are saying, well, Sean, you're just showing us a bunch of items on the screen and who knows, how do we know it works, right? Well, first of all, as I said before, we have over 60 years of assessment experience. So we really know what we're doing at TELC language tests, right?
Sorry, not me and Sean. We don't have 60 years of assessment experience.
Well, combined, right, Tom? I mean, or we take Adrian with us, and I guess that the three of us have 60 years, yeah.
we look as old because we have this background in testing. So just wanted to clarify that fact.
Are they 60 good years? All righty. We have the 60 years. Thanks for interrupting me, Tom. I appreciate that.
Just in case you were going to flow. So.
Well, what we've done over 60 years of testing at TELC is we've been able to create a large database of anchor items. And what are anchor items? These are items that have proven a test taker's ability that we can always point to and say, well, we know how this item functions. We know how it performs for a group of test takers. And we can use this anchor item as a measurement for other items. It's kind of like we have a standard kilogram and we measure all other kilograms against the standard kilogram, right? All of our items are based on the CEFR. They're all mapped to the CEFR, as I demonstrated before. What we do is extensive pre-testing on test takers. So we can put a test with a few anchor items in it and a few new items, and we can see, do they perform in the same way? Do they give us the same results? If they do, then we can use these items in future tests, right? We make sure that all items have the same value. At that point, the items can then be admitted and used on the test. So there's quite a lengthy process behind it, not just a matter of me and Tom sitting around and thinking, well, why don't we ask this, but rather taking items, trying them out, discussing them, trying them on students, comparing them to the CEFR, doing a qualitative review, doing a quantitative review, and getting the best results out of it. As for telc,
we're not trying to trap. Just pointing out that thing about saying, because it's not a trap.
It's
testing
not a trap.
About trying to.
It's can do, yeah. And one thing at telc that we're really quite proud of is we've got also, we have to prove ourselves, and we have to go through, a process, and we've got credentials that we've been working on over the years that we're very proud of. We're the only test board outside of the UK to have off-qual recognition, for example. The only one. Even people at off-qual. Well, you were there, Tom. You helped with that, right? Even they couldn't believe it. We're also the only German member of English UK. I think the Brits are getting a little nervous because we're in their field now, Germans and Americans. We're a full member of the Association of Language Teachers in Europe. So we have the check mark, we have the signal equality, and also a full member of Equals. So we have, not only do we say we're good, we've shown our credentials to others, and we can demonstrate our ability. So with all of this, what we're doing, just like this very hardworking teacher here, is creating an environment, a learning environment, to really open up the world to our students, really. There's much more to an English test, just as this teacher here shows us. There's so much more to English learning than a simple score. 7.5. And I think this man here would never say, you're a 7.5, I'll see you around. Rather, he's teaching, he's guiding his people through the learning process and really trying to help out his kids. So the CEFR really can unlock your full potential, and the digital placement test can unlock the CEFR and bring it to everyone. And with these two items, we really have the whole world opened up to us. So that's it for me. I'd like to say thank you very much. See you later, alligator. Tom?
Thanks so much. That's great. That's really interesting. And I think what we're both looking at here, and I think what is important to stress, is the fact that neither myself nor Sean work for Clarity, work for DPT. So what we're saying, and we've worked with them, of course, but what we're saying, I think, is that we are, as kind of test developers, as people who work in the world of assessment, we're impressed by this, and we think it's a good idea, because it's a good idea. And I think in terms of professional work, I'm sure it's the same for all of you. We're keen to work on projects that help our professional reputation, and we know that the work that Clarity and DP2 are doing now is really building something new and something quite exciting. So we're very keen to kind of be a part of that, to kind of have our name linked to that, because it looks good. And I think what looks good about it is that it's genuinely useful, and it's genuinely something that people can actually benefit from. That washback thing, and I know that this is going to be talked about later by Dr. Adrian and Professor Gao, but the idea of what the test does for your classroom and what the test does for your students is a really key factor. But also that whole thing of saying, look, if we can test people on their phones, and we can test them quickly, securely, reliably, and easily, why would we not do that? I'm old, I'm 47, and for me, the mobile phone is magic, and it is a bit Star Trek, and it is a bit incredible, and yet that's also where we live now, isn't it? That's right. That's where we conduct our professional lives, our social lives, and why would we not test via that device? The idea that that's somehow inherently untrustworthy is a mistake, and I think we can't afford to make that mistake. I think also it's important to stress that all of you are the experts. So we can't say to you, this will work in your context, this will work for your students, because we don't know your students and we don't know your context. So you are the experts here, and you can make that choice. We also were just going to say before we finish, the chat function on here is open, and we're having discussions in there. So please do come and join us
Please
over
do
on that
join
side
us,
as well. Because it's
Good.
quite
I'd like to.
excuse me, go on, yeah.
I'm sorry, Tom. I'd just like to point out that here's our contact information. We'd love to hear from you. Tom Jones at Baroque Solutions Agency. Tom's also representing Atlantic Languages. Me at TELC. Feel free to contact us, or even better, take a look at our website. There's all kinds of great information, all kinds of free downloads. So join us there too. So thank you very much. Have a good day, and enjoy the rest of the conference. I'm having a great time so far.
Information, I've got it all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Back to you, Toshi, I think.
Thank you, Sean and Tom, for your insights on the CFR and the DPT. I'd just like to share something about our university, because we actually do use the DPT, and we've tried different types of assessments. In the past, our biggest problem is always, first of all, is cost. And then the second one is for the platform, because with most tests, it just takes too long, and it's really difficult to administer a test given the class hour, the scheduling. So last semester, we began using the DPT, and it's really been helpful, at least for us, because we kind of get an idea for the student levels, and it's actually easier for us to design our online course based on the data. We actually also conducted a post-test at the end of last semester, so we get to see, the changes and the adjustments. So that's that, and especially because everything's on the computer, so the data is safe and secure. So that's just one thing I'd like to mention. So thank you. Now, just to remind our attendees, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A. Now I would like to share my screen and introduce our next topic. So our next topic is entitled, "Can I test 2,000 students before lunch?" I think I kind of answered that question in a way. And just to mention on this, regarding this topic, we actually have almost 4,000 students. So just that's that. All right. So our speakers will be Dr. Adrian Raper, the Technical Director of Clarity English, and also Professor Xiaoming Gao from National Taiwan University. And Dr. Adrian Raper has actually been studying, developing, and deploying artificial intelligence since his PhD at Southampton University in the 1980s. And after lecturing at Southampton and MIT, he worked as a programming manager in the industry before switching to the field of education. He co-founded Clarity English, where now he is the technical director, and his role is managing research and development, not just for the program themselves, but also the delivery and the support system. He is responsible for the successful implementation of millions of learning and testing sessions rolled out all around the world each year. And Dr. Adrian Raper's current research topic is applying AI to the grading of writing tests. And we have Professor Xiaoming Gao from National Taiwan University. Professor Xiaoming Gao received his PhD in language engineering from the University of Manchester Institution of Science and Technology in 1998, and he has been affiliated with the Department of Foreign Languages and Literatures at National Taiwan University since 1999. Professor Gao's interest is in developing corpus-based computational tools, and he has published extensively on corpus linguistics, computer-assisted translation, and intelligent computer-assisted language learning. He is the co-editor of the Routledge Handbook of Chinese Translations, published in 2018, and he has been involved in several major research projects in corpus linguistics in Taiwan. Now, on to the topic. The next topic, can I test 2,000 students before lunch? So after a test is chosen, the real work of running it starts. You have hundreds or thousands of students to test. You have limited time and resources, and the stress isn't over until every test is graded. And now a digital test holds the promise of scaling up to meet demand without extra work. So can you actually test 2,000 students before lunch? And now let us have let us have Adrian and Professor Gao provide our presentation. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? Can everybody
Yes.
hear me? Okay, thank you. Many thanks to the coordinator and also to Thom and Sean for providing a fantastic introduction about how CEFR is mapped to the items of DBT. So I would like to talk about a little bit about how I mean the perspective of administrators and instructors and users from these three perspectives and share our experience of using the DBT. Okay, next. Next slide, please. Okay, so okay, next slide. So, okay, this is background information of our experience of using DBT at National Taiwan University. And we started to use the DBT in, as you can see from in 2018. And it was a pilot study. So in that year, we we conducted two tests. One is the DBT, and the other is a local proficiency English proficiency test called the GEPT. And so we would like to know the correlation between these two tests. So 2018, there were 433 students in taking the two tests in the same day. So and in following that year, we started to following the pilot study, we started to use the DBT for placement tests in 2019 and 2020. So since 2019, DBT has been used for the placement test for international students at National Taiwan University. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so in the pilot study, the two tests were administered in the computer room at the National Taiwan University, and as the I think that I think many participants know that the GPT has several versions. In our version we used the GPT high intermediate because that was the GPT high intermediate is the it is the students have to pass the GPT high intermediate in order to graduate from the NTU. Otherwise, they have to take other tests like a TOEFL or IELTS, or they have to take a compulsory. If they don't pass these tests, they have to take another English course. Okay, next please. Next slide. So what are the differences? I think thanks to the introduction provided by Sean and Thom, we know how the DBT works, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the comparison between a DBT and a GPT. DBT is DBT is a computer adaptive test, so it's not a standardized test. Okay, it's a computer adaptive test. In contrast, a GPT is a standardized test. So, and for GPT, as I mentioned earlier, there are several versions. So the GPT high intermediate focus on just one particular level. Okay, so in our case, it's a high intermediate, and the test time for these two tests are different. For DBT, as for other computer adaptive tests, the time is not. Sorry, I got the information wrong. Okay, it should be opposite. Okay, for DBT, the test time is not fixed. Okay, and for GPT, the time is fixed. So I got the information wrong. So And the number of items. So also I got the information wrong. So for DPT, the number of items are not the same. And also for the GPT, the number of, not just the number of items, but the test. All the students got the same test for the DPT, because it's a computer adaptive test. A different student will have different items. Okay, next please. So we want to know, we want to explore, investigate DPT from the perspective in the administrators. So we can explore this in terms of test reliability, validity, efficiency, and effectiveness. So what is the reliability? Reliability measures, I mean, it's concerned about the reliability of a test. If we test it twice, then if it's a test is reliable, and we test a student twice, we are likely to have a very similar score. And for validity, it measures what it's supposed to measure. So in an English test, which can decide a learner's level, it will measure specifically the ability associated with a certain level. Just like what Sean and Thom have introduced earlier. So for the DPT, all the items are all the items are based on the CEFR. So each item is matched to a certain CEFR level. So okay, so it will depend on how the test takers answer the questions. If a test taker answers an item but fails, so that the next item will be easier. Okay, the next group of items will be easier. And for the test validity, we want to, it's just measure we will measure what, I mean, we will check if a test measure what it's supposed to measure. Okay, and for efficiency, it's about how much time is spent in that test. And for effectiveness, it will depend on our purpose. If the purpose is to discriminate between different levels, then we will check if it can actually discriminate different levels in a different language learners, different group of language learners. Okay, next please. So we did we conducted a pilot study in 2018. So 433 students participate in that test, and the results are as follows. The next please. Okay, we want to know to what extent is DPT correlated with the GPT, because we know that the GPT general English proficiency exam is a standardized exam. So so we want to investigate if the correlation between the two tests. And we use the Pearson correlation coefficient, and it's quite, as you can see, 0.94, which is very, very strong. It's very strong, a positive correlation between the two tests. What about, okay, we also conducted other tests. Next, please. Okay, so here is some information about the mean and the standard deviation of the two tests. As you can see, the means are quite similar. Okay, the GPT, the raw scores are 2040, just twice as much as the TPT. So I just I mean the raw score is divided by 2. So, and the standard deviation, as you can see, the standard deviation is lower in GPT, and somewhat higher. I will explain why. So from this descriptive statistic provided in this slide, we can know that DPT has a lower mean but higher standard deviation, and for GPT it's just the opposite. And I will explain a little bit about this later. Okay, Next slide. Okay, so we want to this is just a very small scale experiment. I just asked 5 colleagues in the center who are research assistants at in my center, and we know their background. We want to check if a DPT can discriminate between the C1 and C2. So that's the purpose of this this experiment. And also, we want to investigate whether we want to investigate the correlation between the length in English, living in an English environment, and the DPT score. And here is the you see from the plot, you know, is strongly correlated. Okay, so X value means Y is the score of the DPT score, and X is the length of living in an English speaking country. Next, please. Okay, so here at the bottom of this slide, you can see the duration of time spent in this test, and also their CEFR levels, and also the number of years they have spent in an English speaking country, and their raw scores. And I think it's the last, I mean, from the bottom of this slide, you see the two test takers who are labeled C1. They spent about 2 or 3 years in an English speaking country, and the raw score is about around 90. Whereas the rest of the test takers spent over 8 years. And because we interview these research assistants, we know their proficiency level. So this match our intuition about their English proficiency. And as you can see, the correlation between the two is also quite high, 0.8. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we mentioned that we can evaluate DPT from different perspectives. In terms of efficiency, the GPT, when we test a GPT, the time limit is 80 minutes, 30 minutes for listening comprehension, and 50 minutes for reading comprehension. But in contrast, for the DPT, based on our data, because different test takers spend the time the time spent on the test is different. So based on the data, we find that for the NTU student, the maximum amount of time is about 35 minutes. So compared with 80 minutes, it's much shorter, right? So it's more efficient. Okay, next slide, please. So here is the frequency distribution of the CEFR levels based on our pilot study. And as you can see, there are some students below the level of A2, right? So this is quite unusual, because normally normally we won't admit international students below such a, with such a low proficiency level. But somehow I don't know why these students were admitted to NTU. And for most students, I think you see it's the distribution is not as you can see, the distribution is not normally distributed. Okay, it's a bit skewed. Okay, and most students attend the level of B1. Okay, okay, next slide, please. So how can the administrators use the information provided by DPT? Okay, we can, I mean, in our case, we use it as a placement test, and apart from that, we can also use the DPT to identify the students who need to attend remedial English class. Okay, so and also because we know we know the level of students, and also how the number of students for a particular level. So we will know, for administrators, we will know how many classes particular for a level should be offered in 1 year. Okay, and for administrators, with the information from DPT, we can also check if the level of incoming students are higher or lower than the previous years. Okay, and so with the information from DPT, we are also, we can also decide if a student can waive a certain English course or has to attend a remedial class, right? So this is the, we actually use the we use the DPT for the placement test for international students, and also we use the DPT as the criteria for waiving freshman English. So, but I think we can also use it to to identify the student who need to attend the remedial English class, but it hasn't been done yet. So I would suggest that I would suggest my colleagues to I would suggest that my colleague that we can use the DPT score to identify those students. Okay, and also administrators, we can use DPT for the program evaluations. Okay, because after students studying for freshman English for 1 semester or for 1 year, okay, we can evaluate. We can give the DPT at the beginning of the course and at the end of the course, and we can measure the gains of the gains of the program. Okay, next slide, please. So, okay, from the perspective of instructors, we can also use the information from a DPT for many different things. Okay, next slide. Okay, so how can instructors use the information provided by DPT? Because the time is limited, so I will just mention two things that we can do. Okay, first, I think we can understand whether our students are homogeneous. I mean, if they, for my class, okay, I know that all my students are, say, more or less homogeneous. They are most of them are a B2 level. Okay, most of them. Okay, so it's easier for me to choose the teaching materials, because I can choose the materials appropriate to the level of my students. Okay, and also with the information of the DPT, we can also use other tools to help us prepare for the teaching materials, like the vocabulary profile or the readability analyze. I don't have time to go through this. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so the DPT consists of 3 parts: language elements, and also reading and listening. Okay, so it tests receptive skills. Okay, so for language elements, we earlier we from Thom and Sean's presentation, we know that there are different types of items, and these items are great sources of inspiration to instructors. So next slide, please. Okay, so we have items for, say, insertion for a word into a sentence, or sentence reordering, or dialogue reordering, and we know what is tested, and also the relationship to although they are receptive skill, they are closely related to a productive skill like sentence making or dialogue making. And so we can use some of the excerpt or some of the items as the item types in our classroom activities. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so like sentence reordering or sentence making, we can scramble a sentence and then divide students into different groups, and then ask them to give the original sentence. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. So from the experience of the users of DPT, we learned that Taiwanese students are quite unfamiliar with the item types because they seldom do exercise involving sentence reordering or dialogue reordering, and even the matching exercise, matching in listening comprehension and reading comprehension are quite different. So the users express that they spend some time getting used to the test, but and also they are not familiar with the British accent, but they think because most Taiwanese are get used to the American accent. However, they think that the pronunciations, the English pronunciation are very clear, so clear that they don't hinder their listening comprehensions, but they just have spent some time getting used to the accent. And they also point out that some items are particularly difficult in terms of especially the sentence reordering. I think it's very challenging, and also it involves a very high cognitive load. And so overall, our experience of using the DPT at NTU are very positive and also successful. We have used, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, about over 900 students have used the DPT, and we encountered very few problems in using the DPT. And so I think my time is I have run out my time. So so I will thank you very much for attending this webinar, and I will pass it on to Adrian. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to jump now to a very different aspect of testing, the operations side, the nuts and bolts of actually testing all the students that we need to. Now, the talk is based around a question that I was asked a couple of months ago. Can I test the English level of all my students in one morning? Now, that sounded like a bit of a challenge. So this is the story of how it went. And I've called this talk, Can I Run 2,000 Tests Before Lunch? Because, well, 2,000 sounds like quite a big number, and I do like a nice lunch. Now, let me share my screen so that I can introduce you to Sarah, who asked this question. So Sarah wants to run 2,000 tests. Now, how many tests can we run? If it was a paper-based test and I've got to deliver the test and get the result all within one morning, I'd be looking at, what, 10 minutes to mark a test. So in a morning, one marker could do 24. So Sarah's tests are going to take about 80 markers, which just isn't going to happen. Here's a line of about 17 of them waiting. But digital tests, especially a digital test running in the cloud, can scale very easily. It's all about large numbers. And it's all run from the global Clarity DPT Center. You can see me there in my one suit. Now, Toshi mentioned that MCU runs 4,000 tests, but what about everybody else? So if Puyi could open up a poll, maybe everybody could vote in this webinar. What would be your goal for one test? So if you can put your number in, and we'll come back and have a look at this later to see what, oopsie, so I just move my screen there. It's that bit I wanted to move. Oh, I can't. How do I get rid of the poll? Oh, I can't get rid of the poll. Sorry, I'm just going to have to stop sharing the screen. Right, there we are. Let's get rid of the poll. Do beg your pardon. Now we're back again. So, when Sarah asked the question, I started thinking about 5 points, which we'll now go through, and look at the decisions we made in each of the tests. And remember, our goal is how do we test 2,000 students before lunch? Now, when it comes to operations, we always start with planning, the days and the weeks running up to the test. Always 5 questions: why, where, when, who, how. Question number 1, the fundamental question, why? Well, answering the why determines the type of test, the appropriate security, what you're testing, probably how. If Sarah was running an IELTS test, then we certainly wouldn't be able to do it. But in this case, Sarah needs to run a placement test for all the new students who are going to be starting her English course this term. So that's the why. Question 2, where? Well, in any other year, and the answer would have been fairly simple, in the classrooms of the school, or perhaps a big hall. Big halls rarely have enough computers, and computer classrooms are kind of rare. But this year, even those options haven't either been possible or desirable. If students can't get to school for a test, well, you've got no choice but to test them at home. And of course, the key enabler of testing at home is that students can use their own devices. So if you can find a placement test that lets students work at home, then maybe you can reach your goal. Now, this chart shows a recent test from a university in Chile, where I think they did 5,000 tests. You can see that almost half of them used their iPhones. A sizable 1/3 had a traditional Windows laptop. And then there's a variety of tablets, other phones, other types of desktops. Now, this instantly makes the test fairer because access is universal. Not every test taker needs their own full computer at home. So perhaps Sarah can ask the students to take the test at home a week before the semester starts. Oh, but Sarah immediately asks me, what about cheating? Now, test security isn't black and white. If I was doing this test in school, then it would be very little different on digital or pencil and paper. A teacher can wander up and down a class of 40. And if I'm doing it remotely, well, this was a setup that Brunel University in the UK used when they were running dynamic placement tests as a stand-in for IELTS when that exam was cancelled in China. So Lily joins a Zoom session on her phone, which she then places behind her. That videos her taking the placement test on her computer or another device. A teacher can monitor 30 or 40 students via Zoom and give some remote invigilation. And it's also true that a digital test can have questions that are too interactive to be easily copied. Sean was talking about items earlier. This one, you've got to move items around on screen. It's physical as well as cognitive. It's very different to copy something like that. So Sarah decides that she's comfortable to use remote testing and just trusting her students to take this placement test responsibly. Question 3, when? Well, we know Sarah needs to run the placement test before she can start class teaching. It usually happens in the first 3 days of the semester. But of course, our challenge is to do it in one morning. So let's confirm our when and where as the Friday morning remotely from home before semester starts. Now, this is going to be a big advantage for Sarah. She will actually have the students placed in their classes before they turn up on the first day. They can go directly into teaching. So, questions 1, 2, 3, sorted. Next question is, who is going to take it? And this is really the easiest one for us. The operations team is usually just given a spreadsheet and told this is the list of students registered for the course. Sarah was told she would be given the list at the beginning of the week. In fact, she gets it on a Wednesday afternoon after everyone's registered. So let's watch and see a quick video to see if we can import a list of 2,000 students and schedule a test very quickly. Now, I should stress that these are not real names or IDs or emails. Later, we won't see real results. So don't worry about that. So this is the video. And we're starting with the admin panel. Here we go. And we're given this spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet has got a group from Taiwan. It's got a group from Indonesia. It's got a group from Australia. That is going to be exported from the spreadsheet into a simple CSV file, the sort of thing that all spreadsheets go out. We come into admin panel. We say we're going to import the users. We click to upload the spreadsheet that we just created. That will now then chunk through. So it confirms that there are 2,000 names in there, pulling them in. First of all, it just shows us them all so that we can confirm that everything came in correctly, IDs, emails, names, that all looks okay. So we click to save. This will then actually bring all the data in. And now you can see I've ended up with 3 groups, an Australia group, an Indonesia group, and then a Taiwan group. So 2,000 students in, that took about a minute. Now we need to schedule the test for them. We know that the test is going to be added for the Friday morning, 9 till 11. So we're calling it imaginatively Sarah's placement test. Set the open time to be Friday at 9 o'clock. Set the close time to be Friday at 11 o'clock. A very short time for students to do the test. Let's set that. And then we can check who's going to take the test. Well, it's all the students in the 3 groups that we imported. Let's click to save, and that's it. That's the test created. All of our users are imported and done. Now, how will those students take the test? Well, it's very easy to send them all an email. Let's just hop straight back into the admin panel. Up in the top, we'll choose to send an email. We get a welcome email that we can customize, and that can then just be sent out to everybody, just like that. But Sarah knows that some of her students aren't going to read their emails. And based on experience, it seems Taiwanese university students are particularly resistant to reading emails from school. So she's also going to send them a line message, letting them know the URL where they have to take the test, the sign-in details, and away they go. So that's all the planning and preparation work done before we get to the end of Thursday. We've sent that all out. Now, it's Friday morning. I wake up early, 6:45, and as I know Sean and Tom know from bitter experience, you cannot work on an empty stomach. So you've got to get up and have a decent breakfast. This is pretty much my normal breakfast. So what are Sarah and I going to be doing today? Well, we're going to be spending our time doing support. Now, if we had been running the test at school, as we did last year at Wenzhou Ursuline down in Kaohsiung, I'd have got a few student helpers who could have stood outside classrooms as students were going in, checking their phones, making sure that people were getting off to a good start. They could have contacted any expert helpers. We could have had a computer center, a room with computers where anyone who got stuck in the classroom could wander over. But when we did it, it turns out that support isn't purely practical. One of the students whose phone stopped working in class was walking to the language center and she was in tears. Why? Well, it turned out that in the morning, her family had gathered round and given her a specially sharpened pencil so that she would do well in her first day at tests. But she hadn't used the pencil. The phone had broken. It was all going wrong. The stress was getting to her. So supportive words about the digital test would let her restart. It would be fair. That's what she needed to hear. But for Sarah and I today, we're much luckier. We'll have a lot less to do because it's remote support. In the notification email, we told people, we gave them a line chat and then an email support hotline. So we're monitoring those. And from 8 o'clock, messages start coming in. The first ones are all, I can't get into the test. Well, the test starts at 9 o'clock. Just be patient. Then at 9 o'clock, I can't get into the test. Well, probably you're typing the password wrong. The password is your school ID. Check it carefully. That sorts out about 95% of all the support questions. But we do get a couple of students messaging to say that they know their internet connection is going to be really bad today. So we can point them at a paragraph in the notification email that shows them how to take the test offline. It doesn't matter if the internet goes on and off. We keep watching this, keep answering questions. I keep an eye on the admin panel and watch the number of completed tests going up. And suddenly it gets all quiet and I realize it's 11:15. The last test takers started at 11, they're still finishing. Time for a quick and very lovely looking cup of coffee that my colleague Sky has made for me. Suddenly, it's 11:30. The race is now on to get all the results done. So one quick download from admin panel and I get my spreadsheet of results. So let's have a quick look at this. I can see the group that the students were in, their names, and I can see how long they took to take the tests. Now, we said earlier, DPT is a 30-minute test, but you can see some of these, in fact, many of these are a little bit longer than that. And as Professor Gao said, DPT is an adaptive test. And at the end of 30 minutes, if the student is on the boundary between two CEFR levels, a little bit of leeway is given, a few extra items are given and a few extra minutes to add to the accuracy of the test. So we end up with a CEFR level, which is our main output, and a relative numeric, which will, so if Sarah ends up with 1,000 students at B1 level, the relative numeric will let her split those into the 40 students or so she needs to put into each class, so that they are homogeneous in terms of ability as much as possible. Now, if we scroll to the bottom of this list, it's now 11:35, I can see that there are 2 students who started the test but didn't finish it. So I need to find out why. Also, I can see that there are something like 25 who didn't start the test at all. So I can quickly copy and paste their email addresses, send them a note saying, you know, was there a problem? Let me know what happened. Let's reschedule your test. And that's quickly dealt with. Now, Sarah loves to give her students a boost. So she would like to give everybody a certificate. And so here the admin panel will let her generate the certificate with the C1 level, but also it shows the areas where the student is strongest, very much in keeping with the CEFR concept. And Sarah loves this because later on in the self-access part of the course, this will help motivate her students. So all of these emails can be, all of these certificates can be emailed out very quickly to the students. Now, I quite like charts and numbers, so I jump back into the spreadsheet and do a quick pivot table to see what the spread of the CEFR levels that have come out of this morning. This is just from this morning. And I can give this to Sarah. Maybe the faculty meetings will find it useful to say, well, okay, this year is slightly different levels of English than last year. Oh, okay, time's ticking. It's 11:59. So Sarah and I sit down to review how the test has gone. Sarah looks at what we've achieved. When? Well, we did it on the Friday morning so that she would have all her students in the correct class on the Monday. We did it with students' own devices from home. We completed 1,973 tests, and we've followed up already on the 27 who didn't do it. Now that almost 2,000. Now would be a good time to let's have a look back at the poll that we did earlier. So Puyi, can you share the results of that poll for us? Let's see, for people in this webinar, what's a large number? So I'm assuming that everybody can see that. And we can see there's quite a range. Most people are going to be doing a small batch of tests, something like 50. And then it ranges across many ranges. And that's the great thing about digital tests. Sarah did 2,000. She feels confident because it was all done remotely with support. She and I, and she will be able to do it herself next time. She could have done 20,000 tests if she wanted to. Oh, now that was a very good morning's work. Together we've agreed we need a small reward. So what's for lunch? Now, I do love lunch, but I love doing operations as well. So if you would like to talk about any questions related to do with this, here's my contact, my email address. Please do talk to me. But now back to Toshi.
Thank you, Adrian, for your talk, and also thank you, Professor Gao. Now, I'll just like to remind you, because our webinar was scheduled to end at 4 p.m., but we do have some questions from our participants via both the Q&A box and also via chat. So what I would like to do is to share the questions, and we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. We might go over the time by a little bit, but we also understand that some of you might have to leave. So now let me just share my screen and show you the questions we have gathered from the participants. Okay, so the first question is actually directed for Sean, and it's asking what is the future of paper tests? So Sean, could you please answer the question? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. First of all, Professor Gao, Adrian, thanks for an excellent presentation. That was super interesting, and I'd like to get a copy of it as well. Great stuff. Future of paper-based testing. I think the answer to that has changed radically in the last year, at least in this country. Before the COVID situation, people weren't interested. They trusted their paper. They had their paper. That was the time-honored method. It was secure. It was reliable. It was easy to use. And all of a sudden we realized, oh, well, we're going to have to try something different. And a lot of people have been trying something different, namely computer-based testing. And guess what? They love it. And I think in this case, well, we talk about a silver lining. I think the silver lining from the COVID is it really has pushed a lot of people from paper to online. And I'm not just talking about us. I'm talking about my children. I'm talking about the schools. Worldwide, people are seeing, you know, with the DPT as well. It's effective, it's fast, it's hygienic, so to speak. I still think people are going to hold on to their paper for a while, but the situation, the way things are going, I think it's paper is going to go offline a lot quicker than you think. One thing I'd like to put on top of that, our experience at telc is that people discovered if you do an online test, you don't have to send paper back and forth, and you get your results much quicker. A quick discovery. So there's a lot going on. The more people do it, it's kind of addictive. Now it's like gummy bears. I don't know if you can't just have one, then you have the whole bowl full. And I think it's the same with online testing, that people are going to start and they're going to love it and they're going to want more and more.
Thank you, Sean. I hope this answers the question. The next one is, I think, probably addressed to Adrian regarding the type of accents that are used in the DPT.
There's a range of accents used in the listening sections of DPT, some British, some American, and it's something, I think some Australian. We are constantly adding accents where possible, and all new items because items regularly get added in and moved out with different accents.
Oh, actually, I was just wondering, because right now we have this whole globish phenomena in terms of just English being used by people from different nations. I was wondering whether a DPT actually utilizes like Indian accent, Japanese accent, and etc.
At the moment, I don't think we've. One of my colleagues was just earlier talking to me about a Vietnamese speaker doing one of the talks. I'm not quite sure if that's been added in yet, but you're 100% right. Students will hear accents from all over the place. And that's what should be reflected in DPT.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just chip in there, I think what's interesting about accent is it's increasingly irrelevant, because English is no longer the possession of one culture or one accent. It's very much the lingua franca, isn't it? So everybody who uses it, who is clearly understandable, as Adrian Stokes actually mentioned in a talk he did recently, it's that clear pronunciation.
Absolutely right, and that's what we do in the test development. And basically, we just as you said, we try to use global English, so from everywhere that we represent as much as we can. You have to recall sometimes for the recording, it's difficult to find, especially for our recording studio, specific accents. Yeah, yes. I'm looking for, you know, a public speaker who's Vietnamese, who speaks English at level C2. Not always possible, but really we, in our test development, we try to represent as much as possible. And we don't say, oh, this is British. I don't even know what British is, you know, I mean, nobody speaks RP anymore, do they? I mean, it's what English are we talking about? And that's what we have to represent, just as we already said in our tests.
Thank you. So the next question I think is for Professor Gao. Can some of the items on the listening and reading be correlated to the GEPT speaking and writing? And then is there a correlation between the GEPT and DPT based on the, is it based on the entire score, or is it the different skill sets? Oh, Professor Gao, your microphone. You'll have to unmute it. If you move to the mute button, there's a, oh yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, the statistics that I provided earlier is based on I mean, as you know, the GEPT is a two-stage test. So only test takers who pass the first stage will proceed to the next stage. And for the NTU, a requirement is that the student will have to pass the first stage, which is involve the receptive skill, listening and reading. So we don't have the data for speaking and writing. So if we have the data, we can do the statistic, but we don't have the data. Yeah. So, but according to the statistic that we have done about the correlation coefficient, we conducted two types of correlation, Pearson and also Spearman. Okay, the rank order correlation, and both are over 0.94. Okay, so very high. So I think that is sufficient to prove that in terms of reading and writing, the GPT is highly correlated to the DPT. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just add to that real quick? You know, both the GEPT and the well, the DSP correlate to the CEFR, right?
Yes.
I mean, so there's automatically a correlation. You've demonstrated how closely they correlate, or they you know, represent. But clearly, both tests can be related to the CEFR. I think the GEPT isn't as fine-tuned actually as the CEFR. I mean, we talk about advanced, higher intermediate, or intermediate, whereas a CEFR you can really get down to brass tacks on that. So there's my part to that.
Thank you. And I believe this next question is also for Professor Gao with the standard deviation. Yes.
Okay. So here in this slide, you can see the mean is the average score. Okay, the average score for the DPT is lower than the GPT, which means we might interpret it to be that it's more difficult, right? So students get lower score. But okay, but I mean in terms of variation, internal variation of the the standard deviation is how far the score deviate from the average score. So I mean, based on the data, we know that the deviation from the average score is greater in DPT than in GPT. I think this is reasonable. I think Sean and Thom can elaborate on this a little bit more. Okay. So can Sean and Thom elaborate on this, please?
I think it's really interesting. I was going to say, I think what's interesting is often when people look at success rates with tests, and people then say, well, that test is very easy because people pass the test. And you kind of think, no, the pass rate is higher in some tests because the test is designed to allow people to show what they can do. And that's the can do thing. If students have been prepared for a C1, we know what they need to be able to do for a C1. So we put a test together that tests that skill, you know?
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and of course, you know, if you have a test and everybody passes the test, then what's the point of the test? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, but
Yeah.
you know, as much as I love my students, for it to be an effective test, some people have to fail. Just like with my children, they have to fall down every once in a while.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So I have an explanation about why we have a higher standard deviation in DPT. I wonder if it's correct. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because there are less items in DPT. Okay. So in GPT, I think in GPT there are about 90 items. If my memory is correct, it's about 90 items, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
more items, yeah. That's why they. I mean, so that's my interpretation. I'm not sure if it's correct. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it. We don't have much time. I think that's a
Yeah.
thought for discussion.
Yeah.
But really and truly, they're slightly different tests as well, aren't they?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
They work
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah,
And so, you know, I don't want to go too far on this,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it would be more effective. I think somebody mentioned it earlier to look at chunks and comparing those. And as a test as a whole, it gets a bit tricky because,
Yeah,
you know, we're measuring a little bit differently.
yeah, sure. But amazingly, but amazingly, the two, sorry,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Go on.
you go ahead.
No, I would go back, that's my tone, but I would go back and say, well, we can both point to CEFR scales and look at that as a tool for teaching.
Okay.
But you, please.
Okay. So to me, the statistics show that it's not, it is not by coincidence. So to me, the statistics are strong enough to show that they are the two tests are correlated, and also it provides an indirect or maybe empirical evidence that I know, yeah, DPT is very objective, but this is from a different point of view. So from I think this is this just provides other evidence from the other tests.
Yeah, but you have a high number of you know, participants, so you've gathered a lot of data. It's not like you just took two guys from you know, the train station.
Yeah, you're right.
We've got a huge amount of data, and I think it's very it says a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
thank you. And for our last slide, we have actually two more questions. The first one is how long is the test? I believe this is referring to the DPT. How many items are tested and more details, and also about security issues. So I believe Adrian, you can answer this.
The test is declared as 30 minutes. As I said earlier, sometimes a little bit of extra time is given if the test basically hasn't got a confident level of which of two close CEFR scores levels you're at. You'll get a few more questions just to help it make a decision. You don't know how many items are going to be there. It's adaptive. It's always trying to give you items that are appropriate for you. So all the items should not be easy. All the items should not be difficult. So different people get different numbers of items. We've got a lot of information about the test construct. Sean has written extensively about the test from a sort of an academic and test developer point of view. Security, I mean, it's a placement test, and as we said, to be used appropriately. Quite often people do it in an invigilated classroom, in which case you can say the security levels are very high. You've got examples like the Brunel one in China, where the invigilation is medium, and like Sarah's case, where there was no invigilation. So different levels of security depending on how you want to use it.
I would add two things on top of that. As far as the security goes, as we've said many times, It's an assessment. So if you cheat on this test, you're really only hurting yourself. You wind up in a wrong group. And secondly, as Adrian pointed out, we created a lot of items in this test which would be really hard to cheat on, even if you wanted to. In my opinion, I don't know if the rest of you agree, but in my opinion, the only real way to cheat on this test is to have a native speaker sitting next to you. And if you do that, well, then you'll probably do better. But you can't Google stuff. That was our idea. You can't Google the answers. You can't look it up in a dictionary. And so security, it's secure test in that it's complex enough that you just have to have a really good speaker of English with you, or be one yourself, right? And back to Adrian, I just would reiterate how many items are on the test. It depends. It depends how good your English or how poor your English is. And as Adrian pointed out, if you're borderline, then you will get a few more questions to help the system make a decision on that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. So that's the last questions we have. So I would like to end today's seminar by thanking everyone for attending. And please remember to fill out the survey for the webinar. And I'd just like to also let our attendees know that there will be 2 more upcoming webinars, one in May and one in July. So we hope that we could see you again, and you will also receive more information on those. And also thank you for joining us today, Dr. Raper and Professor Gao, Sean, and Thom. And so have a nice evening, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Thank you, everybody. Good to see you.